In our Palo Alto kitchen, I stood there, heavily pregnant at 6 months, hands shaking as I clutched the note I had penned for Richard. Written words, sign language, touches, and looks. That was how we communicated. Richard, who had lost his hearing in a motorcycle crash years prior to when we met, or so I had assumed throughout our 18 months together. He was behind me, reading the note, close enough for me to feel his breath on my neck, when he spoke aloud, clear and unmistakable, in a voice I had never heard before. "Margaret, I have something to tell you." The note slipped from my fingers, fluttering down between us. I watched it fall as if caught between waking and nightmare, because my deaf husband had just used his voice. Let me rewind. I need to explain how I ended up standing there, my world fracturing like a fragile sheet of ice. Now, at 68 years old, I've come to know that some tales must be recounted from their painful beginnings. It was 1991. I was 32, unmarried, employed as a junior architect in San Francisco, and living in a tiny, barely affordable studio. Every Sunday, my mother called without fail, and invariably, our conversations circled back to the same subject. "Your sister Catherine just told me she's expecting again. That's 3 grandchildren now, Margaret." "3? That's wonderful, Mom. The Johnsons' daughter, Amy, you remember her, she just got engaged." "She's 26. My grip on the phone tightened as I gazed out at the bay's rolling fog. "I'm happy for Amy," I replied. "I just don't understand what you're waiting for. You're not getting any younger. Men aren't interested in marrying women in their 30s who—" "Mom, I have to go." "I've got work to finish," but she pressed on relentlessly. Honestly, after 30 years of marriage and raising 2 kids, I can confess that I was lonely, tired of returning to an empty apartment, exhausted from staying late while my coworkers left early for soccer games. Tired of being the only single person at every family event. So, when Mom mentioned Richard Hayes, I listened. He's Dorothy Hayes' son. You remember Dorothy from my book club. Her son started a computer company, very successful and handsome, and he's ready to settle down. "Mom, I'm not going on another blind date. This one's different." Well, he's special, Margaret. He had an accident, a motorcycle accident, and lost his hearing. Something in her voice made me stop. He's deaf, completely. But he's adapted. He's excellent at lip reading and knows sign language. Dorothy says he's still the same charming man, just quieter. A lot of women don't want to handle that, but I thought you might be different. You've always been patient and understanding. I should have recognized the manipulation, but instead, I heard possibility. A man who wouldn't judge me for being 32 and single. A man who might appreciate someone willing to learn sign language, to step into his world. Because of his disability, perhaps he'd see me for who I was, not what I was. "Okay," I said. One dinner, Richard Hayes was everything Mom promised, and more. He was tall, dark-haired with streaks of gray at the temples, his sharp brown eyes focused on my lips as I spoke. Suits that fit impeccably, a Mercedes, and a job in Silicon Valley working on computer software I barely understood. Our first dinner was at a fancy Italian restaurant in San Jose. I had spent 2 weeks studying basic sign language from a book, practicing in front of the mirror. Richard made it effortless. He carried a small notepad and pen, and when my signing faltered, we exchanged notes like teenagers passing secret messages. "Your mother talks about you all the time," he wrote. "The brilliant architect daughter, the stubborn one who won't settle down." I laughed, slightly embarrassed. "She makes me sound like a prize mare she's selling." He smiled, then wrote again, and I felt a flutter in my chest. "She's underselling you." We began dating, if you could call it that. We had dinners, walked the beach, and went to movies where I'd forget he couldn't hear the dialogue. He read the subtitles, and sometimes squeezed my hand during romantic scenes. I took proper sign language classes after work. Richard was patient, gently correcting my hand positions, his warm fingers guiding mine as he showed me how to sign love, tomorrow, or beautiful. His mother, Dorothy, was delighted. She invited us for Sunday dinners at her sprawling home in Los Gatos, watching us communicate silently across the table with tears in her eyes. I was so worried he'd never find anyone, she said one night when Richard stepped outside to take a call, or so I thought. Later I found out he was checking his pager. After the accident, he had retreated from friends, ended things with his girlfriend Julia, who said she couldn't be with someone who was deaf. Can you imagine such cruelty? I could. I often thought about Julia in those early months. What kind of person leaves someone they love because of a disability? How shallow and selfish must she have been? 8 months into our relationship, Richard proposed, not with words he couldn't speak, or so I thought. He took me to the beach at sunset and had written in the sand in massive letters, "Will you marry me, Margaret?" I wept and signed, "Yes," repeatedly. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, a sparkling diamond that must have cost 3 months of my salary, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. 3 months later, we married in a small, intimate chapel in Napa Valley, surrounded by immediate family and close friends. The ceremony included a sign language interpreter. When I exchanged vows, I signed mine with tears streaming down my face. I had found my person, my partner, a man who truly saw me, valuing patience and kindness over small talk and superficial charm. Someone who communicated with me deliberately, every word signed or written with care and intention. On our wedding night, I anticipated he would speak. Isn't that how stories go? The curse lifted, the spell broken. But Richard stayed silent. He communicated through sign and other ways I won't describe, and I fell asleep feeling cherished and whole. We settled into a real house in Palo Alto, with a backyard and guest room, and an office where I could spread my blueprints. Richard's software company was thriving, with partners talking about taking it public within a year. I cut back hours at the firm, encouraged by Dorothy and Richard alike. "You'll want to be home more once the babies arrive," Dorothy said at a Sunday dinner, patting my hand. 4 months after the wedding, I became pregnant. We had been trying, or rather, not preventing it, and when the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, I ran to find Richard in his home office, crying and laughing, fumbling to sign, finally just showing him the test. His face lit up. He pulled me onto his lap, kissed me, held me so tightly I could hardly breathe. Then he signed, slowly and clearly, "You'll be an amazing mother." The pregnancy was tougher than I expected, morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made working difficult. At 5 months, I left the architecture firm. The commute, long hours, and site visits were too much. Richard supported me, of course. He earned more than enough for both of us. Dorothy was delighted. "Now you can focus on what matters," she said as we folded tiny onesies in the nursery, helping me prepare for being a wife and mother. What she insisted was a woman's true calling. As I folded a yellow duck-patterned onesie, feeling the baby kick inside, I asked, "Dorothy, did you work after you had Richard?" "Oh, no," she said. Richard's father wouldn't have allowed it. A man needs to know his wife is taking care of the home. She always referred to her ex-husband as Richard's father. They divorced when Richard was in college, a scandal she rarely discussed. Yet that day she mentioned him, and something in her tone unsettled me. "Well, Richard and I talked about it, and we both agreed this was best," I said firmly, though we had never truly discussed it. We had written about it, signed about it, but was that the same as a real conversation? Could one have a genuine conversation in sign language with someone you'd only known a year? Exhausted, pregnant, and hormonal at 6 months, I was making Richard's favorite dinner, grilled chicken and vegetables, when he came into the kitchen. I had just finished jotting down a note to ask whether he preferred red or white wine for dinner, despite my own inability to drink. I was striving to keep things feeling normal, to play the part of the devoted spouse. Suddenly, he appeared right behind me, so close that his warmth brushed against me. Holding the note above my shoulder, I heard him say, "Margaret, I need to tell you something." The note slipped through my fingers as if time froze. Slowly, I turned around, my pregnant belly pressing against the kitchen counter. Richard stood there, those familiar brown eyes locked on me. His lips moved, producing real sounds, words I could actually hear. "I'm not deaf," he declared. I never was. My mind couldn't comprehend it. The words made no sense. My deaf husband was speaking aloud. My deaf husband just admitted he wasn't deaf. "I can hear you perfectly," he added, his voice rich and smooth, a refined tone that had been concealed all along, waiting. "I've been able to hear everything this entire time." My knees weakened, and I grabbed the counter to steady myself. The baby reacted with a strong kick, as if startled by the sudden surge in my heartbeat. "What?" I whispered, or maybe I only thought I did, uncertain if any sound escaped. "Let me explain." "What?" I repeated, louder this time, definitely louder. "What did you just say?" Richard raised his hands, palms facing out, a motion that suddenly felt menacing rather than calming. "Please, just let me explain. There's a reason you're not deaf." It wasn't a question but a statement, an attempt to cement reality in my mind. "You were never deaf." "No, I was," he continued. "The motorcycle accident never happened like you think." "I did have a motorcycle accident when I was 19, but I was fine. Just some road rash, nothing serious." Watching this conversation unfold, I felt detached, like an observer outside my own body. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. "You've been deceiving me for nearly 2 years." "It wasn't really lying," he said. "It was more of a test, a test." The word lingered between us like toxic gas. "A test," I echoed, my voice sounding strange and distant. "My mother's idea, actually." After Julia left me, my ex-girlfriend, I was devastated. I thought we'd get married, but she walked away, saying I was too focused on work, not romantic or exciting enough. My mother said I needed to find someone who would love me for who I truly am, not for my money or status. Someone patient, kind, someone who would stay even when things got tough. His words tumbled out faster, as though he'd been holding them in for months, something I realized with growing horror he indeed had. So we devised this plan. I'd pretend to be deaf. Any woman who couldn't handle that, who refused to learn sign language or got frustrated by the communication barrier, she wasn't right for me. But someone who stuck it out, who learned my language and showed patience, that person was special. "And you found her," I said, numb. "You found your special person." "How wonderful for you. Margaret, does your mother know you're not actually deaf?" He paused briefly, just enough. "Oh God." I instinctively backed away, hands going to protect my belly. "Your mother knows. She's known the whole time. The tears at dinner, the gratitude that I accepted you despite your disability, that was all part of it. She was trying to help me find the right partner. By lying," I shouted, louder than I ever had in my life. "By tricking some desperate woman into marriage, forcing me to learn an entire language." Richard's face drained of color. "That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair? I learned a whole new language for you. I quit my career for you. I'm carrying your child." My voice cracked. "I'm 6 months pregnant, and you've been lying to me for 2 years. I wasn't lying to your face. You couldn't see my face when we signed. Get out. Margaret, please. Get out of my house. It's our house. I don't care. Get out. Go stay with your mother since you two seem like best friends and partners in this fraud." He actually left, grabbed his keys and walked out, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the burnt grilled chicken on the stove and my world shattered. That night blurred. I remember calling my sister Catherine, sobbing so hard she couldn't understand a word at first. She came over right away and found me on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the sign language books I'd been studying, tearing pages out one by one. He's not deaf, I kept repeating. He never was. It was all a sham. Catherine held me, rubbing my back like our mother used to when we were kids, which reminded me I needed to call Mom. Maybe wait until tomorrow. But I was already dialing. Mom picked up on the third ring, cheerful. Margaret, I wasn't expecting your call tonight. How's my son-in-law? Did you know? Silence. Know what, dear? That Richard isn't deaf. That he's been faking this whole time. That he and Dorothy hatched this entire plan to test if I was worthy of their precious son. More silence. Then, Dorothy said they just wanted to make sure any woman Richard married would be committed for the right reasons. I hung up on her, my own mother, and threw the phone against the wall where it smashed. She knew, I told Catherine. My own mother was aware I was being manipulated and went along with it. Probably thinking she was helping me get married. Oh, Maggie, Catherine whispered, tears in her eyes. That was her childhood nickname. No one else called me that, not Richard, who always signed my full name, nor his mother, nor my own. Just Catherine. What am I going to do? I whispered. I'm 6 months pregnant. I quit my job, and all my savings went into this house. I can't. I couldn't finish because I had no idea what I couldn't do. Leave, stay, start over. At 33 years old, 6 months pregnant and unemployed, I had just uncovered the foundation of my entire marriage was a lie. Catherine stayed with me that night, and several nights after. Richard called repeatedly. I ignored every call. He even came to the house, but I locked the door and warned through it that if he didn't leave, I'd call the police. He left long handwritten letters, explaining his reasoning, apologizing, pleading for understanding. I burned them unread in the fireplace. Dorothy showed up too, but I refused to let her inside. Margaret, please be reasonable, she called from the doorstep. You're carrying my grandchild. We need to talk like adults. You lied to me for almost 2 years, I shouted back. You watched me struggle to learn sign language. You saw me give up my career. You cried at our wedding, acting grateful someone would accept your damaged son, all while knowing it was a ruse. You tested me like some lab rat, trying to protect Richard, trying to control him and control who he married, to make sure she was submissive, patient, grateful enough to endure whatever you threw at her. Dorothy left but kept calling. So did Richard. So did my mother, though I stopped answering her too. I was alone with my growing belly, my fury, and my grief, because that's what it was. The man I married didn't exist. The relationship I built was a fabrication. Every signed conversation, every written note, every silent moment of understanding was now stained. Had he been mocking me when I stumbled over my signing? Did he think I was stupid for not seeing through it? And worse, did I even truly know him? What else had he fabricated? What other parts of Richard Hayes were fiction? Catherine worried about me. You're not eating enough. You're not sleeping. This stress isn't good for the baby. None of this is good for the baby. You need to talk to him. Work something out. You're married. You're having his child. I don't even know if I want to be married to him anymore. The words hung heavy. Catherine looked crushed. Maggie, you don't mean that, but maybe I did. Or maybe I did. I didn't know anymore. The therapist Catherine found for me was Dr. Patricia Chen, a calm woman in her 50s who specialized in complex relationships. I liked that she never called it marriage counseling because I wasn't sure I wanted to save the marriage. I wanted to bury it. Tell me what happened, doctor, Chen said during our first session. I spilled everything. My loneliness before Richard, the pressure from my mother, the relief of meeting someone who seemed to look past my age and unmarried status, learning sign language, quitting my job, the pregnancy, the revelation. She listened quietly, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she said, "That's a profound betrayal." I burst into tears again. I'd been crying nonstop for 2 weeks. He says it was a test to find someone who would love him for himself. How do you feel about that? She asked. Like a contestant on some twisted game show I didn't even know I was playing. Doctor. Chen nodded. That's a valid feeling. Your consent was violated. You entered this relationship under false pretenses. Finally, someone who understood. But Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. She leaned forward slightly. In those 8 months before you married, while you were dating Richard, did you love him? Of course I did. That's why I married him. Why did you love him? Because he was kind and thoughtful and patient, and because he was deaf. I stopped her. No. Of course not. Are you sure? Because from what you've described, the deaf man Richard was pretending to be had very specific qualities. He was quiet. He communicated deliberately. He couldn't interrupt you or talk over you. He had to really listen, or at least appear to listen, to everything you wrote or signed. He seemed patient because he had no choice but to be. He seemed thoughtful because every communication required thought. That's not why I did. I'm not saying you're a bad person, Margaret. I'm saying the reasons we're attracted to people are complicated, and sometimes the very things we think we love about someone are actually projections we place on them. I sat with that for a long moment. Was she right? Had I fallen in love with Richard's silence? With the fact that he couldn't judge me out loud, couldn't criticize, couldn't voice the disappointment I'd seen on every other man's face when they realized I was 32, single, and maybe a little too independent. He still lied, I said finally. Yes, he did. And that's not okay. But the question is whether what he did was wrong. It clearly was. The question is what you want to do now. What did I want to do? I was 7 months pregnant by then. My belly was huge. My ankles were swollen. I was living off Catherine's charity and my dwindling savings. Richard had offered to keep paying all the bills, but I'd refused. Taking his money felt like accepting the lie. I don't know if I can ever trust him again, I said. That's fair. Trust, once broken, is very difficult to rebuild. But it's not impossible. If, and this is a big if, both people are willing to do the work. What work? Brutal honesty, complete transparency, accountability, and time. A lot of time. I thought about that as I drove home, well, to Catherine's house, which was home now. Could I do that work? Did I want to? The baby kicked hard, and I put my hand on my belly. What do you think? I asked. Should we give your father a chance? Another kick? I took it as a yes, or maybe just gas. It was hard to tell. Richard came to therapy with me the following week. It was the first time I'd seen him in a month, and he looked terrible, thinner, gray under his eyes. His usually immaculate suit was wrinkled. He started to sign something automatically, then caught himself. Sorry. Habit. Don't, I said sharply. Don't you dare use sign language with me again. His hands dropped. Okay. Doctor. Chen gave us ground rules. I could ask any question, and Richard had to answer honestly, no matter what. He couldn't leave until the session was over, and we both had to commit to coming back. Why? I asked first. Not the bullshit about finding true love. The real reason. Why did you do this to me? Richard looked at his hands, then at Doctor Chen, then finally at me. Because I'm a coward. I hadn't expected that. Julia didn't leave me because I wasn't romantic enough. She left me because I'm boring Margaret. I'm good with computers and numbers, but I'm terrible with people. Small talk makes me anxious. Social situations exhaust me. I'm awkward and stiff, and I never know what to say. So you decided to say nothing at all? Yes. He met my eyes. Being deaf gave me an excuse. I didn't have to make conversation at parties. I didn't have to be charming. I could just exist. And people would think I was strong and brave, instead of weird and antisocial. And I was what? Your perfect disabled husband accessory. Someone to take care of you and make you look good. No. You were. You were amazing, Margaret. Smart and talented and beautiful, way out of my league. But as a deaf man, I had a chance. You saw me as someone who needed you, someone you could help. And I took advantage of that because I'm selfish and scared, and I didn't think about how it would affect you. I wanted to hit him or scream at him or both. You're right, I said instead. You are a coward and selfish, and you stole almost 2 years of my life. I know. You watched me give up my career. I know, and that was wrong. If you want to go back to architecture, I'll support that financially, logistically, whatever you need. I'm about to have a baby, Richard. I can't exactly start a new job right now. Then after, whenever you're ready, I'll hire a nanny. I'll take parenting leave, whatever it takes. Doctor. Chen intervened. Richard, what Margaret is saying is that the consequences of your deception are real and lasting. You can't just fix them with money or promises. I know. He looked at me again. I know I can't fix this, but I want to try. If you'll let me. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. We went to therapy every week, sometimes twice a week. Richard answered every question I asked, no matter how painful. Did he laugh at me? Sometimes, yes. When I messed up signs badly. Did he read my private journals? No, never. And he seemed genuinely hurt that I'd think he would. Did he love me? Yes. He said yes, with tears in his eyes, and I wanted to believe him, but I didn't know how. 8 months pregnant, I moved back home. Not home to Catherine's home, to the house in Palo Alto. Richard's house, our house, whatever. But I had conditions. He slept in the guest room. We weren't together. We were 2 people cohabitating until I figured out what I wanted to do. That's fine. Richard said, whatever you need. The baby came 3 weeks later. A girl, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a healthy set of lungs that she demonstrated immediately. They placed her on my chest, this tiny perfect thing. And I looked up to find Richard crying in the corner of the delivery room. Do you want to hold her? I asked. He nodded, unable to speak, actually unable to speak this time, choked up with emotion. I handed our daughter to him and watched his face transform into something I'd never seen before. Wonder, pure unfiltered wonder. She's perfect, he whispered. She's ours, I said. We named her Claire, Claire Margaret Hayes, and she changed everything. Not immediately. I was still angry, still hurt, still wasn't sure if I could forgive him. But Claire needed both of us, and in those early exhausted weeks of midnight feedings and diaper changes and endless crying, hers and mine, Richard was there. He was there in ways I hadn't expected, patient with Claire's screaming, calm when I was falling apart, competent with bottles and burp cloths, and everything I was terrified I'd mess up. You're good at this, I said one night. 3 weeks after bringing Claire home, it was 2 a.m. Claire had finally fallen asleep after an hour of crying, and Richard and I were sitting in the nursery, too tired to move. I had to be, he said quietly. I knew I'd already messed up with you. I couldn't mess up with her too. We kept going to doctor. Chen, sometimes with Claire in a baby carrier, sleeping through our sessions. And slowly, painfully, we started to build something new. Not the relationship we had before. That was gone, dead, built on lies, but something else, something honest. I'm still angry. I told him 6 months after Claire was born. I know. I don't know if that will ever go away completely. I know. I need you to understand that you don't get to control this. The timeline, the forgiveness, any of it. You did enough controlling already. I understand. And he did, somehow. He gave me space when I needed it. He was there when I needed that instead. He went to therapy himself, working through whatever childhood trauma made him think lying was an acceptable relationship strategy. His mother was a different story. I didn't speak to Dorothy for a year. She'd decall, leave messages, send cards. I ignored all of it. Finally, when Claire was 14 months old, I agreed to meet her for coffee. She looked older, more fragile, but her voice was strong when she said, "I owe you an apology." "Yes, you do." I thought I was helping Richard, protecting him, but I was really just trying to control his life like I couldn't control my own marriage. "And I hurt you terribly in the process." "I'm sorry, Margaret." It wasn't enough. Could never be enough, but it was something. "If you want to have a relationship with your granddaughter," I said carefully, "you need to understand that I'm not the submissive, grateful daughter-in-law you thought you were getting. I have opinions, I have boundaries, and I will not tolerate any more manipulation. I understand, and you need to get therapy, real therapy, because whatever made you think that test was okay is not something I want around my daughter." Dorothy looked like I'd slapped her, but she nodded. "I'll find someone." She did. She found a therapist and started working through her control issues. It didn't fix everything. Dorothy and I would never be close, but it made family gatherings bearable. My mother was harder. She still insisted she was just trying to help, that she didn't really know the extent of Richard's deception. We're cordial now, but something broke between us that never fully healed. Richard and I had another baby 3 years after Claire, a boy we named James. In the chaos of raising 2 kids, sleepless nights, and endless laundry, we somehow found our way to something that looked like love. Real love. Not the fairy tale I'd imagined at 32, lonely and hopeful, but something messier, harder, more honest. On our 10-year anniversary, we renewed our vows. A small ceremony, just us, the kids, and a few close friends. No sign language interpreter this time, only words. Real, spoken words. "I promise to never lie to you again," Richard said. "Even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when it makes me look bad, even when I'm scared, I promise to keep choosing you," I replied. "Even when I'm angry, even when I remember, even when it would be easier to leave." That was 28 years ago. Now we're 68 and 65. Claire is married with 2 kids of her own. James just got engaged. And Richard and I are still here, still working on it, still choosing each other. It hasn't been easy. Some days, I still feel the ghost of that betrayal. Some days, I look at him across the breakfast table and remember the moment in the kitchen when my world fell apart. Some days, I wonder what life would have been like if I'd left, started over, or never forgiven him. But then I think about Claire's wedding last year, watching Richard walk our daughter down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. I think about James calling to ask his dad's advice on engagement rings. I think about quiet evenings on our porch, Richard's hand in mine, talking about nothing and everything. I think about the fact that we talk now. We really talk about feelings, fears, mistakes, the past, the future, and the messy present. We talk in a way I never did with the silent man I thought I married. And I realized maybe Dr. Chen was right. Maybe I fell in love with the idea of Richard, not the real person. Maybe he fell in love with the idea of me too, the patient, understanding woman who accepted him as he pretended to be. But we stayed long enough to meet each other for real. And we chose to love those people instead, the real, flawed, complicated people we actually are. Was it worth it? I don't know. Some days yes, some days no. But it's my life. The one I chose. The one I keep choosing. And that has to count for something.